Hi everyone, it's Natasha here from Nextwork. It is so exciting to be here with you again today for one last AWS networking project in this series. Oh my goodness, how are we at the last project already? It is so exciting to be doing this one because VPC endpoints is so much fun, and I'm just really glad that we get to end on such a high note today. So, shall we get straight into it? As usual, you can see my setup has our AWS management console on the right hand side, and you will see the step-by-step guide for today's project on the left-hand side of the screen. Now, if you want access to the step-by-step guide, the link to that is in the description box of this video. And not only will you get access to this step-by-step guide, you will also get access to the guides for all different kinds of AWS projects for beginners. So we hope you enjoy these projects, have lots of fun, and learn along the way. Now, today's project, VPC Endpoints, is all about connecting your VPC to other AWS services directly. No internet needed. A really great prerequisite project to do before this one is to look at part 8 of this series, which is called Access S3 from a VPC. We'd highly recommend that you try that project first before doing this one, because this project actually starts by repeating the steps from part 8 so that you can really see the difference of having VPC endpoints in your architecture. Now, what is VPC endpoints? What does it mean? Why are we doing this? These are some great questions to ask at the very start, so let's address them right away, shall we? Now, in the last project, so last project being part 8 of the series, Access S3 from a VPC, this is what you were doing in the last project. Amazing work. In the last project, you used, I realize there's a missing word here. In the last project, you learned how to use your VPC to access other AWS services. Specifically, Amazon S3, that was the service that we were using. We launched an EC2 instance. We set up an access key for it. We used EC2 instance connect to directly connect to that EC2 instance. And then from the terminal of our EC2 instance, we put through our access key details, and then we went straight to putting through some commands that let us interact with an Amazon S3 bucket. That's what we were doing last project. It was such a wild one. Loved it. And I would say a huge highlight of that was learning how to set up access keys and then using CLI commands for the very first time. Because I would say CLI is actually just such a milestone in your learning about AWS and how to interact with them. Otherwise, we would just stick with the AWS Management Console, which is great. But it is true that CLI is something that cloud engineers use in the real world, is something that really makes things more efficient, honestly, to many companies, more professional as well, to use the CLI. So it's great to start using the CLI with that project last week or whenever you did it. And now we'll follow on with this more advanced project called VPC Endpoints. Okay, now being able to access other AWS services directly from your EC2 instance, that was so much fun. That was pretty cool because with access to your EC2 instance, you could use CLI to see what objects were in your S3 bucket. You even uploaded files. But there is just one thing. With this setup, your EC2 instance is accessing your S3 bucket through the public internet. Now, how that works is the fact that, as you can see in this diagram here, how can an EC2 instance in your VPC communicate with a service that belongs outside of your VPC? Typically S3 and Amazon S3 and S3 buckets live in the public internet space, you could say, because S3 is designed to be highly available all across the world. So how could they communicate? And we learned in the last project, they communicate by literally EC2 traffic going out into the public internet so that it can get to S3. But how's that a problem? When traffic is going through the internet, there is a higher risk of external threats and attacks looking at your data. And that's completely true. You know, you could think of um, the internet as almost like the outside world to this like safer, gated kind of area, gated kind of community. So the moment traffic leaves the safety of your VPC and the security of maybe AWS cloud as well, it starts becoming very vulnerable to attacks, very susceptible to attackers trying to literally intercept your traffic, direct your traffic their way, and then use that to steal your data, steal maybe even like your access keys, and it can have really, really big consequences. Not just to traffic not being able to arrive at the destination, but also the security and privacy of your details, of your data. So that's not great for security, is it? That your EC2 instance is communicating with your S3 bucket through the public internet. And you might be thinking, oh, but what do we do? We need resources to talk to each other. That absolutely is key in the world of AWS, and that is true. You're so right. Some of the moment you try to build more robust solutions that are really solving problems and are being used in the real world, they're most likely combining many, many different services. And they're most likely combining services that belong, or resources that belong in a VPC they're combining that with resources that belong outside of a VPC. That kind of communication is definitely still happening in the real world. So how do they do it? How do they do it in a safe way, in a secure way that protects them from these attacks or protects them from being, so vulnerable in the public internet? Introducing drumroll, VPC endpoints. So this is where VPC endpoints come into the picture. So VPC endpoints gives your VPC private, direct access to other AWS services like Amazon S3, so traffic doesn't need to go through the public internet anymore. So cool, so smart, so direct, so secure. Just like how internet gateways are like your VPC's door to the internet, you can think of VPC endpoints as your VPC's private doors to specific AWS services. This is really, really cool. So today, we're going to get ready to use VPC endpoints to directly access your S3 bucket, this little guy over here, from your VPC. How do you get that direct connection that bypasses the internet? Very cool. And then you're going to test your endpoint setup using an S3 security tool called Bucket Policies. That's right. So the first thing that we're going to build is this little guy here, the VPC endpoint, so that traffic can now go from an EC2 instance all the way to the VPC endpoint, and then from the VPC endpoint, straight to your S3 bucket. And that absolutely bypasses the typical route of going through the public internet. How good is that? And then the second thing, we're going to test our endpoint setup. You'll get more context about this later on, but testing the endpoint setup is basically just saying, can we make sure that traffic bound for S3 is actually going through the VPC endpoint? Like, how do we know this traffic is actually going this way instead of going this way? How do we know that? We're going to test that setup by using something called an S3 bucket policy, and that's the red frame you see around our S3 bucket over here. No worries at all if you're like, oh, I'm very new to the concept of endpoints. I'm very new to the concept of bucket policies. That's what this project's about. We're going to learn as we go. And you get to choose between two modes for this project. If you like a step-by-step guide, it tells you every click, it tells you what to write, it tells you where to go. Absolutely try out the high-touch version. That's the version we're trying out today. If you're thinking, oof, I am ready to take on some challenges by myself, I am wanting for you to just kind of tell me roughly what to do and leave me to it. Let me explore. Let me click around. Let me make mistakes if I make mistakes. But part of the learning journey is by exploring on your own. If this is the kind of phase or the stage of learning that you're at right now, go for low touch. Now, always in a project demo, we go for high touch. So we're going to keep that here. And we are going to get started with the project now. So in this project, as a recap, you're going to connect your VPC directly with S3. So there's a difference between accessing S3 and being connected directly. Last project we were accessing S3. We were using our VPC to access, Amazon S3 and an S3 bucket. But now in this project, we're setting up a direct connection between our VPC and the S3 bucket and S3 in general using endpoints. So that's the difference. So yeah, endpoints or connecting your VPC directly with S3 lets your VPC's resources interact with S3 without traffic needing to go through the internet, which is a 200 IQ play for security. Absolutely, it is a 200 IQ play. The cherry on top is also that because you're setting up a direct connection between your network and S3, network traffic is actually traveling a shorter distance most of the time. So this is the typical use case. Network traffic will travel a shorter distance to get to their destination. And this makes your network run even faster and even cheaper. So how good? How good? Okay, we'll start off by recapping what we're here to do today. So this is a great way to honestly test yourself and be like, do I really know what I'm doing today? Do I really know the purpose of this project? These are some questions that we're wanting to answer in this step. So here we're going to say, this project is all about using VPC endpoints. And let's talk about the why. So that our VPC setup and communication with other AWS services like Amazon S3 is as secure as possible. So in this project, we will set up a VPC endpoint and test our endpoint connection using S3 bucket policies. Woo! If you got that as well, good on you. Very, very good on you. Okay, we're going to click done here. Woo! Click done. And don't forget that in order to get documentation that's been automatically generated for you, please make sure that you get to complete all of the tasks in this step-by-step guide. And I mean all. Everything, every single task should have a green border around them, and you should have clicked done at the bottom of that task box, just like what we just did over here. Turned it from a white kind of box to a green box. We've clicked the done button. Now it's gone into task completed. Yeah, we want to make sure this is the case for every single one of these task boxes so that at the end, we get to unlock some amazing documentation that gets generated from all of our responses and all of our screenshots. Okay, now we're going to set up our architecture from scratch. Let's go! Setting up the foundations of today's project, we're going to launch a VPC, an EC2 instance, an S3 bucket. Okay, so all three components are extremely important for this project. I can't imagine completing this project without either of the three. So absolutely, they need each other for this project to work. So let's set them up properly. Now, in your AWS Management Console, please make sure you are logged into an IAM user today. I think it is going to be especially important when you get to set up something called access keys later in the project. So let's make sure you're all signed into your IAM admin user. And then when you're signed in, happy days, we are going to create your VPC. Oh, but before we create the VPC, let's make sure we actually answer this question too. What are we doing in this step and why? In this step, we are setting up the foundations of this project, i.e. launching a VPC EC2 instance and S3 bucket so that we can set up an endpoint architecture and test it and test that setup. And test that setup in the last step of this project. All right, so that is what we're doing today in this step. We are essentially launching a VPC EC2 instance and S3 bucket, and this is the why. And then we'll click done. Who beats? So once you're all logged into your IAM admin user, we're going to start off strong with the VPC. So we're going to use that search bar to type in VPC on the top here, click into VPC, and then we are going to create our VPC from scratch. A heads up that this step we're going to run through pretty quickly because we've gone through this in the previous project as well, called Access S3 from your VPC. So if you'd like a slower, more detailed guide, we'd highly recommend that you check out the previous project for that. Okay, so for the name tag auto generation, we're going to do next work. IPv4 cytoblock looking great. IPv6 cytoblock, always keep it as no. Number of availability zones, we only need 1. And then number of private subnets, we only need 0. Actually, we don't need any at all. And then we're just going to keep the number of public subnets as 1 as well. So we don't need a NAT gateway and we don't need a VPC endpoint. Using the setup wizard, you might be thinking, literally the topic of today's project is VPC endpoints. If you caught that, you're very right, and congratulations to you. We're going to be setting up our VPC endpoint manually later in this project so that you can really feel what you're creating. Otherwise, if you were to just create it from this helper or this wizard, we might find it even harder actually to absorb all the learnings, even though the creating part might be shorter. Well, now that you've clicked none, we're going to create the VPC. All right. Looking good. Our VPC has been launched straight away. You can always confirm that all the resources you are wanting to create have been created using the resource map. If you just scroll down, you'll see we have a VPC getting set up, 1 subnet, 2 route tables, one of them being actually connected to that public subnet, and then an internet gateway. So this all sounds very, very sound. We're very happy with how this looks. And then we can move on to launching the EC2 instance. So to launch an EC2 instance, all you have to do is visit the EC2 console from a new tab, ideally. Honestly, yeah, that's actually also a general tip. Whenever you're switching services, the best call is to switch service from a new tab instead of replacing the current one. Because replacing the current one, you often end up feeling lost. You're like, how did I get here? Where was that one thing I forgot? So we'll try to just open new services from a new tab instead. And now that you're in the EC2 console, we're going to select instances from the left-hand side and launch a new instance. Yes, and we're going to call that instance Network VPC Endpoints. And then we're going to make sure our Amazon machine image is free tier eligible. So is the instance type, please, free tier eligible. And then key pair, we don't need a key pair. And in terms of the network settings, we're going to make sure that this EC2 instance is being launched in your Network VPC. So that is a very, very important one to switch away from the default. We want the Network VPC, the one that you created at the start of this project. Do we want it to have a public IP address? Well, if you've done the previous project, you might remember this, but absolutely we do. We do want a public IP address, and that's because we will be needing it for EC2 Instance Connect happening in just a second. EC2 Instance Connect is that tool that helps us directly access our EC2 instance. And because Instance Connect works over the internet. This means absolutely your EC2 instance will need a public IP address be visible to the internet in order for our EC2 instance connect to actually find our EC2 instance and connect directly to it. I had a brain freeze just then. All right, the security group name, since we're going to be creating a new security group as well, that security group is going to be called SG Network VPC Endpoint. So we'll just replace the security group name with something a bit more recognizable, SG being security group, and then Network VPC Endpoints for this project. And yeah, this security group looks very, very good. Everything that we need. Because EC2 Instance Connect is directly accessing your EC2 instance, the type of traffic is going to be SSH that EC2 Instance Connect is going to use. Since the security group is letting in SSH from all IP addresses, absolutely EC2 Instance Connect is invited to the party as well. It'll be let in. So we're going to launch our instance. Very nice. And we're going to answer this quick task. What resources did you launch in this step? I started my project, or we started our project, by launching 3 key services, 3 key resources: a VPC, EC2 instance, and S3 bucket. Nailed it. We'll click done. And before we finish the step, there is one more resource to set up. So that is the bucket. We're launching a bucket in Amazon S3. And by creating this bucket, we'll access it from our after creating this bucket, we'll access it from our EC2 instance, and it will do things like checking what objects are in the bucket, uploading files, and at the very end of this project, you also learn how to delete the entire bucket just using, just through your EC2 instance. It's very, very fun. And let's create that S3 bucket now. So again, we're going to switch services already. Type in S3 at the top bar, and as always, I'll be opening that in a new tab. And let's create the bucket. So we're going to click on Create Bucket. Okay, and let us set up our bucket by giving it a nice name, which is going to be actually a very simple name. Network VPC Endpoints - your name. And once that name is all set up, there's actually nothing else to do for your S3 bucket. We're going to go straight all the way down and click on Create Bucket because all the default values work with this bucket. When you want to edit these details is when you have a more complex setup and you know exactly what you need from your S3 bucket. In our case, we're doing a one-off project that probably won't live for longer than 1 or 2 days in your AWS account. So we're comfortable with just accepting all the default values for now. Okay, so you've created the bucket. It's looking pretty good. So let's take a screenshot. Oh, actually, before we take the screenshot, we'll upload 2 files into that shiny new bucket. Why? Because later in the project, we want to use our EC2 instance to determine, can our EC2 instance successfully be able to tell what objects are inside the bucket we just created? Well, in order for us to know whether our EC2 instance is returning the right answer, we're going to need to make sure that there are some objects in our bucket, because right now it's empty. So let us click into your bucket for today, Network VPC Endpoints - your name, and then we're going to click on Upload to upload 2 files. Now, if you don't know what 2 files to upload, just know any 2 files works. What file you upload is usually not going to impact the rest of this project. So choose any 2. Literally, we're going to click on Add Files and add any 2 files in our computer. Or really, if you're still unsure about what to upload, you're like, I want to upload a nice photo, but don't really know what to do. please reassurance that this photo or whatever object you upload is not going to go anywhere in your documentation, really. What's more important are the steps that you're going to be taking about these objects later on. We also have 2 files that you can right-click on and select Save Link As, and then you can save these links as PNG files or image files. And once they're saved, you can upload them straight away. So you can see I am opening up this, I guess, folder view of all of the objects, of all the things in my MacBook, in my computer. And you can absolutely look for the images that I've downloaded. Where did those images go? Well, let us quickly find them, please. I wonder where they've gone. Oh dear, where have they gone? Aha! We see 1 called Lilo is awesome. Do we see 2 for Denzel is awesome? We do. We have both. Okay, so we're going to upload those 2 files. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. And then you're going to click upload right away. Cool. That means your S3 bucket has 2 files in them now. And then we're going to take a screenshot of the Objects tabs showing the 2 new files as evidence. All right. Just like that, you can take a screenshot and then add that to your step-by-step guide so that it can collect the screenshot and reuse them for your documentation after this. Oops, that screenshot didn't take, so let's take it one more time. Awesome. We'll drag the screenshot into our step-by-step guide. It's looking nice, it's looking slick. And then we're going to connect to our EC2 instance next. So now that you've launched your EC2 instance, we're going to find it, we're going to track it down so that we can connect to it. All right, so select the checkbox next to your EC2 instance, select connect, and then we're going to click connect right here. Lovely, lovely. And while we're waiting, in this step, we are connecting directly to our EC2 instance using EC2 instance connect. Connecting to the instance will help us with accessing S3 and running commands for our students' learning. No, actually, we'll just stop it here, right here. Connecting to an EC2 instance, to our EC2 instance, will help us with accessing S3 and running commands later in this project. Boom! Done! So now that we've successfully connected to our EC2 instance, we can try running some commands. You know, the first one is AWS S3LS. And what's the result that we get when we run this? Shall we take a bet? All right. The response is that actually S3 or AWS is unable to locate your credentials. It's saying, look, I don't even know what account you could have access to, what is your username, what is your password. We need those details in order to figure out whether we can even give you access to AWS, and if so, what account you're going to be using when you're like launching an S3 bucket, for example, or we're trying to read an S3 bucket's details. So you can configure credentials by running a magical command called AWS configure. So that's what we're going to run. And it asks us for something called an access key ID. Ooh, what does this mean? So access key IDs are exactly like what we mentioned just now, like a username and the access key ID would be the username, and then there's going to be a matching password called a secret access key as well. Now, what this means for us, that we need to run AWS configure, and there's kind of like an empty field for our access key ID so far, is probably the fact that we need to create an access key ID. So we'll be doing that in just a second. Well, in the meantime though, we do have a few tasks to answer. What was the command you ran? Oh, what was the command we ran when we were doing this specific step? AWS S3 LS, someone is in a very similar stage to us. Now, what was the command you ran? The command I ran was AWS S3 LS This command is used to list all buckets in an AWS account. Awesome. We're going to click done to finish that off. And yeah, now that we know that we have to configure the terminal's not asking us for an access key, okay, and let us answer what are access keys. So we have touched on access keys in the previous project, but again, an access key is kind of like your EC2 instance's login details into your AWS account. You can think of it that way. Just like how when you set up your IAM admin user, you had to set like a username and a password, and it's exactly the situation here right now. Okay, so access keys are credentials that an EC2 instance, other server or application would need in order to get access to our AWS environment, e.g. creating resources, reading what's inside our AWS account, etc. Pretty proud of that answer, so we'll just click done and finish that off. And we're now ready for the third step. We're going to create those access keys. So creating access keys is quite a fun part of this project, because access keys, there's a lot that comes with it. You know, when you set up access keys, you'll see this in a minute, but there are a lot of security things to be aware of when you're setting up access keys. And another thing to be mindful of is the fact that access keys and the password, the secret access key, it's just so important for us to secure them. And my favorite part is when you actually set up the access key and it says stay on this page, and you find out that that page is the only place for you to save your secret access key. That's probably my favorite part. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So in this step, we will set up access keys, set up an access key so that our EC2 instance will have access to our AWS environment. Cool. We can think of access keys almost like login details for EC2 instances, applications. I'll be cheeky and say non-humans to get access or to interact with our AWS services. Nice. Done. Awesome. So to create access keys, all we have to do is, again, use that handy search bar. And sometimes you don't really know what is this service, the AWS service, that gets you access to a specific tool. Off the bat, it might be a little hard to guess which AWS service is going to give you the access keys that you need. So sometimes you can just type in the reasons you're looking to create access keys, and then over here in the services list, you'll see that the services that get recommended are probably ones that have access keys mentioned throughout or are highly relevant to the concept of access keys. IAM is the correct answer. So with that done, we have a new tab now in our setup, this time with IAM. Now, still, we don't quite know how to get to access keys from here, do we? So one way to get there is by literally searching in the internal search bar too, to search access keys like this. And then there's going to be a search result that says manage access keys for user, and it enters your IAM admin username. Whew, so good. They're looking after us. We're going to click on that, and just like that, there's no need to, I guess, dig around in all different parts of your AWS environment so they can find an answer like this one. Well, in this case, we have our IAM admin user in front of us. And we are going to be creating the access key that we're talking about. So this access key, all we gotta do is click that shiny create button, and here we are. So the use case we're going to be picking is command line interface, and then we are going to chug on ahead, head on next. If you like a slower explanation around this step, creating an access key, I highly recommend that you check out the previous project before this one on accessing S3 from a VPC. All right. Cool. We're going to make sure that we get to write a description for our EC2 instance in a second. But in the meantime, a great question to think about is, what is the best practice alternative to using access keys? So we're really channeling our critical thinking now, because we're not just talking about the pros of access keys, we're also talking about scenarios where actually access keys aren't always the solution to go for. So although I'm using access keys in this project, a best practice alternative is to use IAM admin roles instead. This means the necessary permissions will be attached to an IAM role, and then the role will be associated with the relevant resources. Cool. This means the necessary permissions. This means any necessary permissions will be attached to an IAM role, and then the role will be associated with the relevant resources. Not bad at all, not bad at all. We're just going to click done here. And we're going to make sure that we can set that description tag value, so we can copy that, paste that over here, because it is completely true what this statement says. An access key was created to access an S3 bucket from an EC2 instance. And yeah, this is the Network VPC Endpoints project. Don't forget that. All right, we're going to click on Create Access Key. Okay, and then we're going to stay on this page. This is the special page that is my favorite, because look at this. This is the only time that the secret access key can be viewed or downloaded. So after maybe a couple of times, or after a short certain period of time, we won't be able to see anything related to that user's, I guess, like secret access key as well. Cool. So when you're here, one thing you're going to notice is that there's something called access key best practices. So they're being very, very careful about what you should and shouldn't do with an access key. But importantly, the button that we want to click on here is to download CSV file. And this essentially downloads your access key as a spreadsheet. So it has details about your access key ID and the secret access key all in one place in that spreadsheet. So that's a very, very handy button to have, the fact that you can download these details into a spreadsheet. And with that being said, now that we have your access key all set up, let's answer this question. What is a secret access key? Very good question. So a secret access keys are secret access keys are like passwords. In the context of access keys, credentials for our EC2 instance to get access to our AWS services environment. Awesome. With that done, we can finally connect to our S3 bucket. So the access keys have been created. You have the power now with this key to access AWS services. So shall we try and use that key, use a little bit of that power on accessing S3 and managing that S3 bucket directly through our EC2 instance? Heck yes, we want to do that. So in this step, you're going to head back to your EC2 instance, and then you're going to get your EC2 instance to access your S3 bucket. So you're going to do a connection, or traffic is going this way now, from your EC2 instance all the way out to the world of the public internet and then into S3. Very interesting. In this step, we are applying our access key credentials to our EC2 instance, and then using AWS CLI, to get, and then using AWS CLI and our EC2 instance to access Amazon S3. In this step, we are applying our access key credentials to our EC2 instance, and then using In this step, we're applying our access key credentials to our EC2 instance, and then we are using grammar. And then we are using AWS CLI and our EC2 instance to access Amazon S3. Perfect. That's exactly what we're doing in this step. So now that we're going to head back to our EC2 instance Connect tab, you now have all the details you need to fill out this quick little form that comes up when we run AWS Configure. Now, in your local computer, open up the spreadsheet. You can open up the spreadsheet that you've downloaded when you created your secret, when you created your access key, because this is literally your access key username and your access key password in the spreadsheet, right? Like looking like this. Or you could always, if you have this tab still open in IAM when you created your access key, you can copy them directly from here as well. So for example, you can copy the access key from this tab and then paste that in here. Ooh. Very nice. It's been accepted, so that's good news. And now it's asking us for the secret access key. So what is the password? You can again copy that here, or you can like copy it straight from your spreadsheet. Both work. And then put that through to EC2 Instance Connect. Okay. Awesome. Once those two milestones are done in terms of, I guess, applying or like getting your EC2 instance to actually get access to your AWS environment, there's also two last things to cover here. Your your default region name is the name of your region that you're working with right now, but not like the name like Oregon or Sydney, but rather the code name. All right, I've been signed out of my own account, so we'll just get that back as well. But in the meantime, is there a question? Oh, never mind. I was gonna say maybe we can answer a question in the meantime, but you know what? The fact that this was done very, very quickly, I am not mad either. So I'll just log back into my AWS Management Console so we can get back into it. Sorry about that interruption. Okay, all right. Unfortunately, we're starting anew within this EC2 instance because we've refreshed the tab technically. So let's run AWS configure with our EC2 instance one more time. All right, so access key ID is something that we can find. Oh, we'll probably need to reload this one too. The access key ID is something we can find right in the spreadsheet right here. You know, you can put that through like this. And then the secret access key, the password, put through like this. Done. And then the default region name, don't use the name like Oregon or Sydney. Use their code name. So for example, for me, I'm going to be putting in US West 2. So that's going to be me. And for the default output format, ooh, a very, very good one. If you're wondering what is the default output format, what does it do? So in short, when you're running commands or running AWS CLI commands, a lot of the time the terminal is going to talk back to you. It's going to say, oh yeah, I've done this, or there's been this error, or this has been updated now. You know, all kinds of replies or all kinds of status updates are there. And the default output format is pretty much like what language do you want EC2 Instance Connect, or really what language do you want your EC2 instance to speak when it's providing you with those updates. You know, so some of the options on the table are JSON, there's text for plain text, there's tables, there's another format for storing data is called YAML, and that is extremely popular as well. So we have all of these default output format options, and honestly, knowing that we're setting up something very simple today, the default option works great. So we're just gonna press enter on our keyboards and move away from that, move past it. Perfect stuff. So shall we answer this question too? Oh, before we do that, just double checking if we missed a step. No, we didn't. So we're gonna fill this in. What were the 4 things you just configured? Shall we do a roll call? Shall we do a roll call? Okay. The first thing we configured. First thing we configured was the shower. The first thing that we configured was the AWS Access Key ID. So the AWS Access Key ID. We also configured the secret access key, matching that key ID. You know, they really work like twins, hand to hand like this. One is the username, one is the password. And we also set up the default region type. And then the default output format. Okay, we're going to review this answer. To set up my EC2 instance to interact with my AWS environment, I configured the AWS Access Key ID, secret access key that matches that key ID. the default region type, and then the default output type. That's amazing, amazing, amazing that you can do that with just commands. So we're going to press done. We did that. And now we're going to try running AWS S3 LS, all right, to see if we can see our account's S3 buckets. Ooh, shall we do it? Don't want to see it. Don't want to see it. Just joking. All right, we're going to run that. And here we go. Here we go. You know, your results might look slightly different, but the key thing to look out for is there a line that mentions your S3 bucket that you created just now? Next, look VPC endpoints. Your name is the correct answer. So it looks really good. We should be very proud of ourselves. And we're going to take a screenshot to celebrate. Alrighty. We're going to drag that into this task box. Okay. And then we're going to have a little debrief about this. The terminal responded with, this indicated that the access keys I set up. Oh, very, very true. So what happened when we ran AWS S3 LS? The terminal responded with a list of my account's S3 buckets. This indicated that the access keys I set up correctly give my EC2 instance access to my AWS account and environment. Okay, very nice. And just realized this is not the right shape. The terminal responded with a list of our accounts, S3 buckets. This indicated that the access keys we set up. This indicated that the access keys we set up this indicated that our access keys were set up correctly. And can give our EC2 instance access to our AWS account and environment. Very nice. Look at you go. I think that looks pretty good. So we'll click done on this one as well. Very nice. And we have more commands to run. Are you feeling ready? Do you remember what this command is about, or can you tell what it does just by reading it? We just learned that AWS S3 LS gives us a list of all the buckets in our account. So what do you think will happen if we were to run AWS S3 LS and then there is a path to our endpoints project over here? What do you think is going to be the result of running this command? Let's find out. So let's paste this command. For yourself, make sure that you replace your name, this little placeholder here, with your actual name, so that your bucket name is unique, and then all of these commands are correctly calling for that bucket that you've set up. Cool. So once that's ready, let's run it. What's going to happen? Awesome. Oh, I don't know if this is the right result, actually. So we are going to run this command one more time. Let's make sure it is the result that we want. There we go. This is the result that we want. Don't know what was the typo that was happening there, but when you run AWS S3 LS, so list all S3 objects, but then the end of that is the link to your like a specific part or a specific bucket in S3. What's going to happen is the terminal is actually going to output the objects inside your bucket. So cool, so granular, so practical and helpful. All right, now that you have that done, let's also take a screenshot of our terminal's response so you can keep a record of this. And let us answer a few questions as well about it. Okay, so let's take a screenshot. Ah, it's looking good. And let's drag the screenshot. No, don't go. Let's drag the screenshot all the way into our step-by-step guide. Ah, it looks good. Okay, I also tested the command. What was the other command we tested? Do you remember? So I also tested the command AWS S3 LS, and then the I guess a specific location of the, I guess technically the folder or the directory that's a little bit on fire right now, or for some reason isn't working at the moment. But yes, we also tested this command, AWS S3 LS, and what did it return? This returned a list of all of the objects inside that S3 bucket. Looking very good. Let's click done. Oh, and let's move on. Yes, the last command that you could play with and learn about is something called sudo. And the reason why we're going to be running this command is because we want to do one more experiment. Did you know you could upload entire files using AWS CLI as well? Just using this terminal. No need to go into the management console, but you can upload files. What? How does that work? Well, first of all, let us actually create a sandwich locally, and then we're gonna upload that. Can't believe I called it a sandwich, but really we're creating that file locally. Okay, so the command we're going to run to create that file locally is called sudo touch. So sudo stands for super user do, and it is a command we use if we wanted to do something locally in our computer. So technically not AWS related, we just want to create a file in our local computer in that EC2 instance. And then touch is a standard command used to create an empty file if it doesn't exist. Okay, so in our situation, it's probably going to create that file. And then we also have /tmp/network.txt, and these are just some awesome supportive messages as well from some of our friends. Okay, oh, almost lost the page. Okay, so let us run this command now. Done. Empty file created, just like that. Okay, and then the next line is we're gonna do something even more, I guess, like built on top of the previous one. Now we're doing not AWS S3 LS, we're doing AWS S3 CP. So CP stands for copy, and what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be copying basically the empty file that we've created so that we can place it into the project. So we're essentially uploading this file right now into our S3 bucket. So now that we've copied this command, let us paste that in here, run it. Ooh, it's so cool when the terminal has some pretty detailed responses. And in this case, we get to literally see a status update that the txt file, network.txt, has been uploaded. Okay, this is very, very helpful. So if you like, you can even run this command to again list out all of the objects in your S3 bucket. Well, since we have copied and uploaded a new file, technically we should be seeing a new line when we run this command now. So do we see it? Let's put it to the test. Oh, don't think that was the right command copy, so let's make sure we copy the right one. Whoa, look at that. So absolutely, the new file that you've created, network.txt, is doing really well. It has 0 bytes though, so there's actually no video or no photo content associated with it. But at least it is doing very, very well. Alright, so we have the 0 next to nextwork.txt, which indicates that it has 0 bytes. But more importantly, let us take a screenshot of the last 3 commands that we ran so that we can put that into our documentation too. All right, let's take a screenshot like this. And then let's plop that in there. Very nice. And let's answer a few questions too. To upload a new file to my bucket, I first ran the command. Yes, what was the command we ran? The command we ran was started with S. Do you remember? It's called sudo. And what was the second command? It's always fun to test yourself a little bit. So we know it starts with sudo. What was the second command? It was touch. So it was sudo touch. So let's copy that. And that was the command we ran. This command creates an empty file named nextwork.txt and saves it locally in the EC2 instance. Very nice. All right, I think that looks pretty good, but there's more questions to answer, so let us make sure we answer everything. The second command I ran was this command will. All right, the second command we ran was, what was it? Do we remember? The second command we ran was copy. That was the command where we copied the empty file we created and added that to our S3 bucket. So the second command I ran was, let's put that through. This command will, yes, what will this command do? This command will copy the file I created, i.e. nextwork.txt, and upload that to my S3 bucket. Sounds great. Then the third command I ran was, what was the third command you ran in this last experiment? The third command you ran was ls again. So we ran this command that involved AWS S3 ls. This validated that. What did it validate? It validated that a new file was created and uploaded into our S3 bucket. Very nice. It looks really, really good. So we'll save that as well. We'll click done. Very, very good. And you can even switch tabs back to your S3 console. Oh, it's asking us to sign in again. Yikes. Shall we just refresh the page? I think this might work. So you can even go back to the Objects tab of your S3 bucket, and you're gonna see what's there now. Nextwork.txt. That's right. So the what's the best way to call it? So the file that you uploaded into your S3 bucket using the CLI has successfully, those changes, you can successfully see them anywhere now. So congratulations. It is super, super cool. Okay, now we're going to step into the new era. What we've done so far in steps 1 to 4 was a really, really great revision and repeat of the previous project. But now we're in a new era, right? Don't forget, your instance is currently connecting to your bucket through the public internet, and we want to change that. We want to make communication direct, private, secure. So we're going to bring in something called VPC endpoints to do that. Okay? And the impact of this really is that our VPC and S3 can communicate directly once we set up this endpoint. So what are we doing in this step? In this step, we are setting up a VPC endpoint so that communication between our VPC and other services like S3 and other services. Well, not just like S3, it's especially S3. Is direct and secure. Nice. Done. Alrighty. So in a new tab, we're going to make sure that we're going to go back to our VPC console, which is also asking me to sign in again. My goodness. I'm going to sign in right away. And then we're going to click on the handy Endpoints tab, or the Endpoints page from the left-hand navigation bar. Okay, when you're here in the Endpoints page, what's going to happen is you can just create an endpoint right away. So we'll be creating this part of an architecture diagram, this specific part, right away. So let's see how it looks in action. We're going to create the endpoint. And before we keep on going, what is an endpoint actually? So, such a great question, by the way. What is an endpoint? Again, don't forget, endpoints allow private connections between your VPC and other AWS services, and usually the scope of these endpoints are quite narrow, so you get to specify exactly which artists you're going to be listening to, or which artists you would like to partner with, all explained like in detail, for example. And here, now that we know that your endpoint allows private connections between your VPC and other AWS services, you might be thinking, again, this is a reminder that AWS resources, some of them don't get launched inside your VPC. So while your EC2 instances live within your VPC, S3 buckets, some other AWS services don't do that. They live outside of your VPC. They're designed to be highly available and accessible from anywhere, and technically even putting them behind a network, putting them inside a VPC is considered restrictive. So, perfect. So with that in mind, let us set up our endpoint with a name. Let's give it the name Network VPC Endpoint. Sounds pretty straightforward and familiar. And then we're going to keep the service category as AWS services. And under this search bar, we're going to search for S3, and we're going to make sure that the one we select is the second one here, or whichever placing it has, as long as the option that we're picking just has S3 at the end. It's not like S3 Global Access Point, S3 Outposts, S3 Express, none of that. Just S3. And then between the two options, we're just going to click on Gateway over here. Awesome. And then we're going to click on the VPC that we're wanting to use, which is Network VPC. Awesome. We'll leave everything else as they are and create the endpoint right away. That looks really good, doesn't it? Okay, so before we move on, just realized you might be wondering, what does a gateway actually mean? Because just now we were selecting, once we picked S3 from the list of filters, we had two options. One was an interface and one was a gateway. So what is their differences? Now, the first thing to know is that a gateway is a real OG when it comes to endpoints. A gateway is a type of endpoint used specifically for Amazon S3 and DynamoDB, so no other service, to my knowledge, would be able to use a gateway. So gateways work by simply adding a route to your VPC route table, and that is going to divert traffic bound for S3. So any traffic that's going to arrive at S3 will now get routed to your VPC endpoint instead of going through the public internet as usual. Cool. So now that we have created the endpoint, it looks great. We're going to do the next step, which is to have a quick check of your endpoints details like this. You can see that there's an ID, and this ID is going to come into handy very, very soon. And the endpoint type, we get confirmation here that it's a gateway. So all of that looks very, very good. So we're going to take a screenshot of this details tab, and then we're going to add that to our documentation. It looks really good. Alrighty. I don't think I'm a fan of the screenshot actually. I'm going to just quickly create a new one. So let's create a new screenshot. And let's drag that into our step-by-step guide. Nice, it looks good. What is an endpoint? Yes, let's answer that question first and foremost. So, an endpoint is an endpoint. An endpoint is a VPC component that allows our VPC to have a direct connection to AWS services so that traffic doesn't have to go through the public internet. Very nice. So with that done, I think we have one more question in here. So what is a gateway specifically? I set up an S3 gateway, which is a type of endpoint specifically designed for Amazon S3. Gateways work by updating the route table of associated subnets so that S3 bound traffic goes through the gateway instead of the internet. Alright, that looks really, really good. So we're going to click done and complete that. Ooh, your answer is not editable after submission. This is very true. So every time we click done, it will be the final answer that gets saved into the documentation that gets generated at the end. Alright, step 6. We're going to create a super secure bucket policy. Ooh, I love this step. So good work. You've just set up a VPC endpoint. And now you might be wondering, how do I know that my endpoint is truly providing direct access to S3? How can I confirm my VPC isn't still communicating with S3 through the public internet? So to answer these questions, the question of how do I make sure traffic is actually going like this, instead of getting blocked here, instead of all this going through the public internet. So to answer these questions, we're going to validate our endpoint connection by doing something a little bit wild. This wild thing that we're going to be doing, hold your horses. This wild thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to block off our S3 bucket from all attempts to access it. So your S3 bucket is no longer going to accept any kind of traffic except for traffic coming from your endpoint. It's the ultimate test. It's the perfect setup. If your endpoint was truly set up properly, then your EC2 instance should still be able to access S3. Otherwise, your instance's access will be blocked by the new rules we're about to set up. Cool. So in this step, what we're going to do is we're going to limit our S3 bucket's access to only accept traffic coming from the endpoint. So intense. So what are we doing in this step? In this step, we are testing our endpoint connection by blocking off all traffic to our Amazon, to our S3 bucket, except for traffic coming from our endpoint. That looks really good. So we're gonna click done, we're gonna save that. And then we're going to make it happen. We're actually gonna be creating that bucket policy. So to create a bucket policy, all we have to do is we have to visit the bucket in the S3 console. And then we're gonna select the permissions tab for your S3 bucket. And don't forget, your S3 bucket should be called Network VPC Endpoints Your Name. So we're going to set that up. And then we are going to scroll all the way down here to the bucket policy panel. This is where we're going to click edit. And then we're going to copy this bucket policy and paste it right here. Pause, okay? Now that you've pasted your bucket policy, we're going to pause and we're going to debrief for a little bit. Because you might be thinking, oh gosh, I feel like a lot of things have happened in just one fell swoop. Why are we here again? What is this policy? Totally fair if you have these questions. So let's talk about it now. All right, so what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to block off all traffic coming into our S3 bucket unless it's traffic from the endpoint. So in order to do that, in order to restrict access like that, or in order to restrict traffic like that, you can create something called a bucket policy. And a bucket policy works at the resource level. So that just means this policy you're creating here is only going to be effective for this specific bucket. And it won't affect traffic trying to go to another bucket. So it's very, very granular, which is very helpful. And you might be thinking, what is this policy actually saying? So let's break it down. All right, so we're creating this policy so that we can do what we said that we were going to do, block off or deny all actions on your S3 buckets to everyone except the traffic coming from our endpoint. Now, how you can break this up, I just realized this doesn't give you that line by line detail. So what we can do right now is actually look at this and talk about that line by line detail. So here we're saying, these top two lines, honestly, you can ignore. Version is just basically saying what version of this policy language are we using, not too relevant to us. Statement is basically saying, hold up, I'm about to write a fire statement that's going to affect people's access to my S3 bucket. It's just almost like a header you can think of. What's really important is to actually look at these ones that are slightly more indented. These are very, very interesting, because this policy is saying we are not going to allow any kind of S3 action on the specific bucket. And this specific bucket will have a specific, almost like a barcode, which we call an ARN. Okay, and this applies to everyone. So quite an intense statement, but there's a condition. There's a condition that this policy will apply to everyone whose traffic is not coming from this specific endpoint. Wow. So that condition section is very, very handy, as you can imagine. Okay, so before we click on Save Changes and Finish, do you notice, that there are actually 3 things in this policy code that we need to change? Otherwise, it wouldn't be valid. Can you tell which are the 3 things? Well, or you can say 2 things. Give yourself a second, pause this video right now, have a think. Okay, I'm gonna guess that you're ready now to talk about it. So the 3 things we need to change. First of all, this, like we mentioned before, an ARN is like the barcode to our like S3 bucket or any kind of like resource. And here you can notice your bucket name is really just a placeholder. So we absolutely need to change that. Fun fact, you can hold down Command on your keyboard or Control on your keyboards to multi-select multiple sections. So here, knowing that the ARN or the name of our S3, the name of this S3 bucket is Network VPC Endpoints your name, we're going to replace it to say that. So Network VPC Endpoints your name, like this. And once that's done, what about the other thing that we need to change? Can you spot it? So the other thing that we need to change is the endpoint ID of the source VPC endpoint. That's right. So now that your S3 bucket policy is going to block off access from everywhere except the endpoint, the specific endpoint, we're going to want to make sure that we are specifying exactly which endpoint this bucket policy is going to allow traffic from. Well, right now, it's just a placeholder. So let's replace this section with the proper ID of the VPC endpoint setup. So how we're going to find that is we're going to head back to the Endpoints tab that we have over here. And if you don't have your Endpoints tab open, you can find it by visiting the VPC console. And do you see how there's endpoint ID looking flash already, ready for us to copy? So we can copy that. Alright, and we can paste it right here to make it look profesh. Okay? So once that's done, you're ready, definitely ready to save your changes now. Cool. Alright, some interesting stuff is going to unfold. Are you ready? Alright, so what's going to happen? Oh, we need to take a screenshot of the S3 bucket policy. We'll do that in a second. So interesting stuff is going to unfold right now. Look at this. What? Isn't this so interesting? So the moment we saved our bucket policy, we have been denied permission to even view any of these panels now in the permissions tab. My goodness, S3 works fast, doesn't it? The reason why you can't even see any of these panels is, well, don't forget what our bucket policy does. It really says block off all traffic, just all traffic, except for traffic coming from the endpoint. Are we traffic coming from the endpoint? We're not. We're not traffic coming from the endpoint. So because of that, since we're trying to access our S3 bucket using the AWS Management Console, which uses the public internet, absolutely, we don't have access actually to view anything or to do anything with our bucket. So that's going to be an interesting development to work with. In the meantime, though, we were supposed to take a screenshot of our S3 buckets policy, and unfortunately, I was being very, very silly, and we already have missed the screen to take a screenshot of our bucket policy. You know what I might do, which is always a very sneaky workaround, is I might just create a I might just try to edit the permissions tab or the bucket policy for another bucket, okay, just so that I can have that space to take a screenshot. Shh, it's our secret, okay? Don't tell anyone. Alright, I'm going to copy this code one more time, and I'm going to paste it in here, okay? And then over here, the bucket name is, Next work, VPC endpoints, your name, and then the endpoints ID. We're going to copy that. Okay. And then we're going to put that through here like this. Okay, it looks so good. And now we can take the screenshot of our bucket policy. So we'll take that screenshot right now. Hold on tight. Whew, looks good. So let us scroll down and put that into our documentation template. Very nice. Okay, a bucket policy is, very nice. Great question. A bucket policy is a type of policy that has granular control over who has access, who has access to an S3 bucket, and what are the actions that they can perform. My bucket policy will, oh, that's true. What will your bucket policy do? My bucket policy will deny traffic from all sources except for traffic coming from my VPC endpoint. Looking very good. Alright, so once it's done, we can click done. Awesome, and we can move on ahead. I think we don't have anything else missed here. So we can move on ahead and move on to the next step. So now we're gonna try access our S3 bucket again. Do you think it's gonna work? Well, this is gonna be a fun test to run. So it is the moment of truth. Now that your S3 bucket's access is only limited to your endpoint, can your EC2 instance still access your S3 bucket? If it can, okay, it means you set up your endpoint connection perfectly. If it can't, if your EC2 instance also can't access your S3 bucket, there's got to be something wrong with the VPC endpoint setup, because the bucket policy clearly states that anything with the source of the VPC ID should be able to be let through and use it. So in this step, you're going to test your VPC endpoint setup, and then we're going to troubleshoot a connectivity issue. That's correct. That's exactly what we're going to be doing. So in this step, we are testing our endpoint connection between our bucket and EC2 instance. Awesome. Once it's done, click done, and let's get straight into it. So we're going to head back to our EC2 instance connect tab, and then we're going to run this command. Are you familiar with this command? Can you tell what it does now? Always when you see ls in the command, it means list. So instead of like writing anything, we're just reading here. We're trying to figure out what are the objects inside this bucket. Well, regardless of what that command was trying to do, we are getting an access denied error. That's correct. Access has been denied. So why is our EC2 instance also getting denied access? Don't forget, we're supposed to get access, not be denied, because this EC2 instance is a part of the VPC. So traffic coming from the EC2 instance is technically should be going through the traffic should be going through the endpoint instead. So what is really happening if somehow access is being denied? Well, we'll start first by just taking a screenshot of this error. Don't forget to collect our evidence so we can add that to our documentation. So we're going to add that screenshot right over here. Okay. And then we're going to drag that into our documentation so it looks perfect. Okay, nice. All right, once it's done, let us investigate. Troubleshoot this. You can pause this video, but the important thing is you have a think. Up until now, you've learned a lot of different components of a VPC. Which of these would you need to investigate or configure so that you can diagnose this issue? Okay, some of the components we've learned are internet gateways, we've learned about subnets, we learned about route tables, IPv4 addressing, network ACL, security groups. We learned about a lot of different kinds of concepts, over the past, 7 projects or 8 projects in this series. So it is very, very fun to be reviewing all of these components and thinking, ooh, which of these components can help me solve this issue? All right. Enough of the teasing. How we're gonna answer this is by visiting our VPC console and then heading to the subnets page. Okay, and then from the subnets page, select the checkbox next to your public subnet. Well, it does look pretty striking given that it's the only one with a name. So select that one and then select the route table. Aha! Mystery solved, isn't it? So if you're wondering, what is this route table really telling us? How is it that the mystery is solved? We'll ask another question back to you. Using this route table, just look at this route table. How would traffic from your EC2 instance get access to an S3 bucket? How would traffic from your EC2 instance get to the S3 bucket? Well, S3 buckets, as we know now, definitely don't belong in a VPC. So the destination wouldn't fall into this CIDR block at all. So that means they won't be going on the local path. What they're going to do is they will automatically get directed to the second route if the first route doesn't work out. Traffic bound for S3 isn't within the VPC. That means it will just automatically fall into the second route, which goes through to the internet gateway. And that, my friends, means that the traffic is definitely not going through the endpoint. It is going through the internet gateway instead. So if we were to draw that in a diagram, this is what's happening here. So traffic from your EC2 instance is going through the internet gateway, and the internet gateway takes them to the public internet. And it tries from the public internet access your S3 bucket, but it can't anymore. Your bucket has a very, very strong policy that prevents them from getting in. In the meantime, the VPC endpoint you've set up is just getting crickets. There's no one really sending traffic, or really traffic is not really going through the VPC endpoint. So it's thinking, why isn't there any traffic coming? Well, the real fix lies in updating the route tables so that traffic knows where to go, and it doesn't go into the wrong path. All right. So with that said, shall we do a little bit of fixing now so that our route table now has a route to the VPC endpoint? How we're going to do that is on the left-hand navigation panel, let's select Endpoints. And then from here, we're going to click on Route Tables so that we can manage the route table and then select our public subnet that can take us to the VPC endpoint. So we're going to click on Modify Route Tables. We're going to finalize our decision. And voila, look at that. There's now a route table for that mentions that your public subnet and your VPC is now very much linked up with your VPC endpoint. So now you can even click onto your subnet, revisit that same public subnet, and check out the route table for it. And then let's refresh this as well, refresh the page. Ta-da! A new route has joined. That is awesome. Really what this is saying is any traffic that is trying to get to S3, the path that they're going to take is the VPC endpoint now. So that is a really, really nice milestone. And let us get ready to take a screenshot. So let's screenshot that updated route table like this. Then we're going to drag that screenshot all the way into our step-by-step guide. Lovely jubbly. And let's answer a few questions. So I also had to update my route table because, such a good question. I also had to update my route table because my route table by default didn't provide a route for traffic in my subnets or in my VPCs or in my subnet, my public subnet. I also my route table because my route table by default didn't provide a route for traffic in my public subnet. Oops, see daisies. In my public subnet to the VPC endpoint. All right. Perfect. Next question, shall we? The next question asks, to update my route table, what did we do? To update my route table, I visited the endpoints page of my VPC console. And what else did we do? And to update my route table, I visited the endpoints page of my VPC console. And what else did we do? And we modified the route table from there. From there to associate our VPC's public subnet. Excellent work! So that was very, very helpful. Because you'll now see the impact of that in the next step. Our final step for this project is that we're going to access the S3 bucket one last time so that we can test the effectiveness, or we can test whether our endpoint has been set up perfectly now. So what we're going to do is we're going to test our VPC endpoint setup one more time, and then we're going to play with a new AWS CLI command. All right, let's get started. So in this step, we are going to validate our VPC endpoint setup one more time. We are also going to use actually, instead of play with new AWS CLI command, one second. Instead of this, what we're really going to do is we are also going to use endpoint policies to restrict access, to restrict my EC2 instances, our EC2 instances access to our AWS environment. All right, so let's read that out loud. In this step, we are going to validate our VPC endpoint setup one more time. We are also going to use endpoint policies to restrict our EC2 instances access to our AWS environment. Yeah, this is completely true. Just realized this was not mentioned in the intro, but absolutely we're going to be doing another kind of policy, just like how bucket policies protect S3. You can think of endpoint policies as something that's highly relevant to VPC endpoints. So let's click done and let's get ready to do some hands-on work. So let's head back into EC2 Instance Connect. I feel like it's been a while since we were here. I missed it. And let's run this command, bring it back. So let's run this command. Do you remember what this command does? Do you remember what this command does? This command has ls in it has list in it, and it also has a reference to our bucket. So what this command does is it lists all of the objects inside this bucket. So let's run this command and see what happens. Woohoo! We've run the command. Previously, our access was denied, but access is back on. How good is this? Feels good to see a success message, doesn't it? So what that means is, oh, perfect timing. We can answer this to dissect this together. So after updating my public subnets route table, my terminal could, or really, my EC2 instance could connect with my S3 bucket. Access was no longer denied. So good. We're going to click done on that. And last bit on the endpoint policies. So did you know VPC endpoints can be configured using policies too? Fun fact. So we'll do a simple configuration by first switching to the endpoints page. So we're going to find endpoints over here. We're going to click into it. Endpoints. Looking good. And then we are going to, with your endpoint already selected, this checkbox here selected, we're going to click on the policy tab. Let's click on policy. And then we're going to edit the policy. So surprising. Turns out there was already this default policy that basically describes what the endpoint allows in JSON. So currently, if we were to dissect this existing policy, it currently allows all kinds of actions on all resources. So what that means is traffic that goes through our bucket policy has access to all of the resources in our AWS account, and it can do all actions. Anything that you want, you can do in an AWS account. Traffic that is coming through this policy will be granted, I guess, the permission to do that. Now, what could be interesting to note though is that don't forget that the type of endpoint that we've created is an S3 gateway. So technically, there is already a bit of a limitation on exactly what this endpoint allows, because technically this endpoint is a gateway to just S3. So even if this policy looks really intense, like it gives you access to all the AWS services, it gives you access to all of the actions you could do in each of those services, technically this policy is only, this endpoint in total is only granting like traffic the access to S3 specifically, not other services. So that's an important thing to note. Now, in the meantime, we're going to try change this policy by clicking on Edit Policy on the right-hand corner. And then over here, we're going to try change that effect from allow to deny. What do you think is going to happen when now our policy is going to say all resources, all actions are denied? We'll see now. So let's save our changes. All right, and let's again run that trusty command on listing all of the objects in our bucket. What do we see now? Oof! Again, access is denied. My goodness, how effective was that? So just by changing the endpoint policy, we're now stopped from accessing our own S3 buckets objects too. Now, the cool thing is, it makes you think about why bucket policies are useful. Not bucket policies, why endpoint policies are useful. Why do they actually exist? First of all is it gives you really granular control, because now you can say traffic going through this endpoint can have access to do this, but not have access to do that. You can get really, really granular on the permission side of things. But something that's also very, very useful is the fact that policies can now be a very, very great tool to quickly just block off access instantly if you suspect attackers are using your endpoint to access your AWS environment. For example, you can instantly switch to effect to deny, and your gateway is effectively closed. The gateway doesn't actually provide direct access to the S3, to Amazon S3 anymore, or to other AWS services anymore. All right, so let's take a screenshot of our endpoint policy. Let's click on the policy tab one more time. Let us take a screenshot of that policy. Looking cute. All right, let's take a screenshot like this. Looks pretty good, and we can drag that into our step-by-step guide. All right, that looks really good. And then we can explain, what is an endpoint policy? An endpoint policy is a type of policy designed for specifying the range of resources and actions permitted by an endpoint. And how did you change your endpoint policy? What was the effect? Oh, very good question. So I updated my endpoints policy by, I could see the effect of this right away because, all right, let's answer that. I updated my endpoints policy by changing the effect from allow to deny. I could see the effect of this right away because my EC2 instance my EC2 instance was again denied access to S3 when I tried to run another command. When I tried to run another, let's be very clear, when I tried to run another AWS S3 command. Okay, done. Awesome. So we're going to select edit policy one more time and then change the effect back to allow, because we're going to need the allow effect in order to delete our S3 bucket later. The more you know. All right. Wow. We made it to the end. My goodness. That was a shocker. That was very fast. Well, I would say that came sooner than I expected, that's for sure. Congratulations. Nice work. You've just completed today's project and you learned how to set up direct private access to S3 from your VPC. All done. Woohoo! Congratulations and high fives all around. Let us close with a few final questions. What is Amazon VPC? Why is it useful? Let's talk about that now. Amazon VPC is a networking service provided by AWS and gives us the ability to isolate our resources from the public internet, set up connections, to be very clear, set up secure connections between our resources and control traffic flow security. Next, how did you use Amazon VPC in today's project? Great question. We used Amazon VPC today. What do we use it to do? We use Amazon VPC today to set up VPC endpoints, which are tools. We use Amazon VPC today to set up a VPC gateway, VPC endpoint. Specifically, what we set up was an S3 gateway. This provides direct private access from our VPC. This provides our VPC with direct private access to another AWS service. So good. What is one thing you didn't expect in this project? Oof, I have a good one. I wonder what is the thing that you didn't expect. I have a good one. One thing I didn't expect was to see my own access to the S3 bucket getting blocked once I saved my bucket's new policy to block all access except traffic from my endpoint. All right, looking pretty good. Last question. How much time did this project take you? Ooh, 2 hours, maybe 20 minutes, including demo time? Awesome. I wonder how much time this project will be taking you. Will it be a lot shorter than 2 hours, 20 minutes? Fingers crossed. Maybe it'll be closer towards 1 hour. I would say if you could complete this project in 1 hour, a big kudos to you. That is a huge feat. All right. Let's select done to finish that off. And we're going to delete our resources to wrap up the project today. Now there's some more exciting stuff coming up now that we have completed all of the tasks. We will now get automatically generated documentation. That's going to come in a second. I'm going to let that generate in the background. And in the meantime, let us delete our resources. Okay, now actually, before we do that, stop and ask yourself, can I challenge myself to try delete all of the resources without the help of the step-by-step guide? Can I do that first instead of referring to the step-by-step guide to delete my resources right away? Being able to keep track of your own resources and what needs to be deleted is a very, very good skill to have. We highly rate it. So absolutely recommend giving this a go by yourself before watching this tutorial or before reading the detailed notes in the step-by-step guide. Alright, in the meantime though, I will also be doing this, so if you prefer to do this with someone else, let's do it together. Oh, and we're back online. Sorry about the cut, everyone. Temporarily went offline for a little bit. Classic haps if you're running a live project demo. But that is okay, we are back online now, and let's get straight into deleting our resources. Because we went offline for a little bit, what's happened here is our EC2 instance has shut down and come back up in terms of our EC2 instance connection. So our terminal doesn't look the same as what it did maybe 30 minutes ago, or sorry, what it did like just a while ago. But it's okay, the commands and everything will still work exactly the same. It's just that the terminal history won't look the same, but that's okay, we'll work with that. Okay, so something to note is there is an importance in the order of what we're deleting things and in the order and how we're deleting things. So ideally, we're going to be deleting our bucket before we delete our endpoint, because since access to our bucket is restricted to just the endpoint only, that means our EC2 instance has the special luxury, the special privilege of pretty much being the only resource in our architecture right now that can delete that S3 bucket. So if we were to delete a resource like the endpoint first, what that means is the connection your EC2 instance has to your S3 bucket gets deleted, it gets removed from the architecture. And just like that, there's going to be no resource that can delete your S3 bucket like that. You will have to log into the root user and do something that's a bit more like, I guess that bypasses the way our architecture is set up. But by default, technically, no resource will be able to delete your S3 bucket if you delete that endpoint first. So to make sure the ordering is all okay, we're going to delete the S3 bucket first. So get the riskiest item out of the way. And how we're going to do that is, first we can always test, can we just delete this bucket ourselves, over here? And what you're going to find is when you try to delete this bucket by yourself, when you click delete, and you put through your name in this field, it all looks very promising, like you can just delete it, you're just one step away. But when you delete the bucket, it says, you don't have the permission to delete the bucket. Well, fair enough, that's what the bucket policy states. Only actions can be done through the endpoint connection. So let's try do it through the endpoint connection then. Let us follow the bucket policy's rules and use commands to delete this bucket. So the first command we're going to run is called RB, which is remove bucket. So AWS, we're interacting with AWS, we're interacting with S3, and then the action that we're wanting to perform is remove bucket. And here is the name or the path to that bucket that we want to remove. So let us copy that command and let us try run that in our terminal. Interesting. Do you see this error that came up? So the remove bucket failed, not because we were denied access, but because the bucket isn't empty. Aha, a classic thing that comes with trying to delete a bucket. You have to make sure the objects inside are completely gone as well before you can delete the S3 bucket itself. So how can we delete all of the objects inside your bucket? There's a very handy command for that that is called AWS S3 RM, which means remove, and there's also a dash recursive. So RM stands for remove, it's used to remove things inside your bucket, and then dash recursive is where it becomes very powerful. Dash recursive means the remove command should just go through all of the objects and subdirectories inside your S3 bucket. This is just very, very helpful because RM on its own can only just remove objects one by one, basically, until you combine it with recursive, and recursive basically just go through every single object inside the bucket and delete, and delete, and delete, and delete. So the command to use if you're just wanting to empty an entire S3 bucket in one go. So let's click on this and copy that, and let's paste that. Perfect. All of those have been deleted. Do you see that positive? Well, technically maybe deleting something isn't positive, but do you see this affirmation or assurance? It has delete at the front. So that's awesome. That's a great outcome. And then we're going to run this command to remove the bucket one more time. Can we remove the bucket now that the bucket is actually empty? Let's find out. Aha! We removed the bucket successfully. You can even see here, remove bucket over here. So perfect. We've successfully removed the bucket. We can even try to view the buckets page, from the Amazon S3 console to verify that it's gone now. And it's gone. We went from 5 buckets to 4. So that command was very, very successful. Good on you. And Yeah, you can even go as far as to running the AWS S3 ls command, which will help you notice that the entire bucket, so next to VPC endpoints your name, that specific bucket, is no longer on the list. So that means the entire bucket has been deleted successfully. Very, very, very good. Now that we have deleted the bucket, the riskiest one of them all, we are now safe to delete a lot of the other components. So let's start by deleting the endpoint, for example. You should be able to select the endpoint under Actions, delete the VPC endpoint, and type delete. All right, and then now that that's gone, maybe let's delete our EC2 instance. Okay, so let us terminate the EC2 instance that's running, and make sure we don't get charged. So let's change that instance state to terminate instance, and terminate it. We don't need it. Very, very nice. While it's getting terminated, there are a few other resources, well, at least two, that's on my mind that we can go check out. The first one, access keys. We set them up inside, do you remember which service? IAM. So we served them inside IAM. We created them inside IAM, and now it's time to delete them. So let us find access keys here. Okay, let us delete it. So we're going to scroll all the way down to access keys, and under actions, we're going to select delete. Very cool. You have to deactivate a key before you can delete it. So let's click on deactivate as well. So it's access keys deactivated. And then we're gonna confirm the deletion. Goodbye. So let's delete our access key. Very nice. And with that, well, now that the EC2 instance is terminated, we probably EC2 instance connect will just get terminated, or like this session will get terminated with it. And yeah, endpoints have been deleted. Anything else? Actually, let me bring back this tab because yes, there is something else, and that is the VPC itself. So let's go check out the VPC. Don't forget to always refresh it. Select the checkbox next to it, and let us delete the VPC as well. I am very curious now. Is there anything that I'm also missing? Shall we check it out? So we have deleted the EC2 instance, we've deleted the endpoint, deleted the VPC. Very nice. We've even deleted the IAM access keys. So I think that's all of the deleting covered. Phew! And we can now share the project. Oh, so good. It feels very, very good to be able to share the project. Well, what's going to happen is we're going to scroll all the way down, and we're going to click on this shiny blue button that says mission accomplished, so we can see our documentation and see some pre-filled LinkedIn posts that lets us post our work on LinkedIn. So let's scroll all the way down. Whew. There are still tasks to complete. So if you see this, it means you still have tasks to complete. Not all of the boxes have turned green yet. How are we going to do that? Is we're going to search for the text return to later to quickly jump to whichever question hasn't been, or whichever task hasn't been finished yet. Which one is it? We do have something that we still haven't completed. So we have to take a screenshot of the Objects tab, and then there is a question that we didn't answer here. I also set up. So this question was asked all the way back in step 1, I believe. Or maybe step 2. Yes, it could be could have been, oh no, it was step 1. All right, so in step 1, we completely missed this question. Apologies, team. So in step 1, what was interesting to mention is just I also set up an S3 bucket with 2 files inside. That was it. Done. Were there any other questions we didn't get to? Any other tasks we didn't complete? Yes, there's a bigger one here. Take a screenshot of the denied access panels. Ah, yes, when we were initially denied access right after saving the bucket policy. Now, you might notice I've already deleted my bucket, so this is going to be a little bit harder than I expect or than usual to take a good screenshot of. But luckily, a bit of a cheat code for myself is that we do have a past project that I can use to take a screenshot, that I can use for taking that screenshot. So we'll go ahead and do that. So here's another bucket with the exact same situation. So I'm going to take a screenshot of this one and add that to our documentation. So let's take a screenshot here. Lovely. And let's add that to the documentation like this. Looks good. And let us answer this question. Right after saving my bucket policy, my S3 bucket page showed denied access warnings. This was because my bucket policy is denying all traffic that doesn't come from my endpoint, i.e., the policy denies traffic from the AWS Management Console. Right? Because using the AWS Management Console doesn't mean that we're using an endpoint to connect to our bucket. That was why. All right, so once that is completed, I think we can complete this task overall. Let me upload that screenshot one more time. Very nice. Oh. It says there are tasks still to complete. Are there? Seems like this text one looks pretty good to me. I'm going to try upload something manually. Maybe this will work. Is it still say task to complete? That's okay. Let's give the page a little refresh. Maybe a refresh is all we need. The page is taking its time to load. Usually when that happens, it means maybe there's been maybe it's a bug that it still says tasks are still to complete, even after we've uploaded our screenshots. Okay, let us find to the next return to later section. Perfect, we can press done now. So yeah, it was as simple as just refreshing the page for myself. So if you see the same error, highly recommend that we refresh the page, and then you should be able to click done right after. Oops, is there anything else I'm missing? There is. Let us click done here. Any others? Oh, we do. Oh, it's a done galore. Let us click done on all of these. And let us take a screenshot, upload that for the denied access panel. Cool, we can press done now. Oops. Is there anything else I can press done on? Oh, clearly yes. Anything else? Oh, that was the last one. We've mission accomplished. Wow, that was a mish. That was definitely a mish. So we've accomplished that. How good. Let us download our documentation with just a single click like this. And then let us share our amazing work on LinkedIn. So awesome. Once you click on that share on LinkedIn button, you'll see that you will get a pre-populated LinkedIn post already written for you. All you have to do is double click on the next word. Oh, or if it doesn't work, you can add a new @ in front of next work. And then you can close this little preview and then add the document straight away. So since that your documentation has already been downloaded, all you have to do is find it in your downloads file and then give it a name. All right. And when you've titled it up, click done, and you should be able to post it right away. Off it goes. Happy days. It looks awesome. All right. So once that's all done, once you've shared your post, you can discover more projects here. But really, what would be great to mention is just a huge congratulations on completing this project. It is a chunky one. So if you've made it to this point, you should give yourself a big pat on the back for making it here. It is an accomplishment. You should be extremely proud of yourself. So as the grand finale for our networking series, you've learned how to set up a VPC endpoint, you've managed permissions with bucket policies, you even resolved some VPC endpoint issues. Wow, what an amazing final project for this series, combining Amazon S3, Amazon EC2, Amazon VPC, really getting them to all work together. Yeah, it's just such a great project for that. And you also get to really set the foundations for some awesome connections between AWS services in the future too. You know, especially skills like using CLI, and then there's even like the concept of creating connectivity tests, figuring out whether or not you can still get access to your S3 bucket by applying bucket policies. So many cool things have happened just in this one project. So it is wild that we have all of these learnings packed in one session. A special kudos to you for completing the entire networking series. Awesome work. We'll see you in the next project. In the meantime, let's stay in touch in the community. A big congratulations again for finishing this series, and you should be absolutely proud of yourself. All right. That is it for today. Again, let's stay in touch in the community, and thanks again for watching. Bye.